Hey guys, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge. Today I have a tremendous game for you all. This game here is Anatoly Karpov versus Garry Kasparov. Now this is a part of their FIDE World Championship match that was going on in 1984 through 1985. And it was a lot of controversy in this match here. They were playing for literally months and months without anyone being able to win the match outright. So as you can expect, plans were being delayed. Hey guys, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge. Today I have a wonderful game to bring you all. It's the game between Anatoly Karpov versus Garry Kasparov. Now this is the FIDE World Championship match that was played in 1985, game number 16. Now there's a lot of controversy surrounding this match here because the match was actually started in 1984, and I guess the rules then was that the first person to win 6 games was going to be declared the winner, but neither player could actually win 6 games, so they kept drawing. So the match actually lasted for months and months, and like the buildings were being held up because like plans to rent the locations out that they were playing at the tournament halls was all put on the back burner until the match was decided. And since the match kept going on and on and on, that means that the organizers and the sponsors, they were all losing money here. So what FIDE did is they actually stopped the current match that was going on, wiped the score clean, implemented a new set of rules, and then the new set of rules made it easier for if the match was tied at the end, Karpov would retain the title. So both players agreed to the new rules, and then they started to do battle. And this here is game number 16, and it's a masterpiece. Let's go ahead and dive in, and let me show you what happened. Karpov was white. He was predominantly an E4 player at that time. When he played E4, he usually won. You know, his saying was when he played E4, he won, and then when he was black, he drew. So that was kind of his motto. That was his stance. That was his philosophy on his game back then. Kasparov is a known Sicilian player. That's where he does his work at with C5, knight F3, E6, D4, C takes D, knight takes D4. So right now we have an open Sicilian. You know, black is going to play along the open, semi-open C file right here. And then white has more space. He's got more material out in the center of the board. He's going to have more space to play with. In theory here, we still have to see what happens in the game. And then also one of black's trumps in the Sicilian is that he's got these 2 pawns on E and D. So the ability to put 2 pawns in the center of the board is also a trump or a plus. Let's go ahead and continue with the game. We have knight C6. This marks the timing off Sicilian. Knight B5. Now white is eyeing that D6 square. He would love to play knight D6. Then black would have to take the knight with the bishop and give up his dark square bishop. Then black would be weak on the dark squares. So white would just love that. So Kasparov plays D6 to prevent that. C4 is played. This initiates the Maroczy bind. Some people call it the Maroczy wall. But the idea behind it is to restrain black from pushing in the center. Is to restrain black from building up any type of big central forces there, I guess you could say. It keeps black in a more cramped position. And then white will castle and put his rooks and his queen on that D file and his pieces to all aim at this D6 square here. So then you have knight F6, which is played. And this is an important nuance here to play knight F6 here, because you see the knight over there on B5. So a lot of people would want to kick the knight. If you played A6 here, then black could just redirect that knight to C3. Then black would play F6, bishop E2, bishop E7, castles, castles. And the white knight on the B1 would be able to just develop the D2. White would have no problems at all. This would be a great line for white to play. He wouldn't have any issues. So the importance of playing knight F6 first is that knight F6 actually forces white to play knight C3 to protect that pawn on E4. So now, once black kicks the knight here with A6, he's got to go back to A3. Now you got a white on the rim, a knight on the rim, and you know what they say about that. They say a knight on the rim is dim. So that's a very passive and bad knight there on A3. So now you have D5 from black. Now this is an incredible move because, you know, white has spent his whole entire opening trying to stop D5. That's the whole point of the whole Moraxi bind, is to restrain black's position from branching out. But Kasparov said, hey, you know, I do what I want. So he went ahead and played D5. It's a pawn sacrifice, but if he's able to implement his plan, he'll have nice, easy development, and he'll eventually get his pawn back as well with correct play. So let's see what happens here. C takes D, E takes D, E takes D. Now here's the whole idea of it. Knight B4. Knight B4 is how he's going to get the pawn back if he chooses, because now you have the queen and both knights hitting that pawn on D5. So he'll be able to recapture his that pawn there in the future if he chooses here. Now you have bishop E2. Bishop C5 is played in the game. Kasparov, he decided to ignore grabbing that pawn on D5, getting his material balance restored, because he felt like it was better to bring out more pieces and to increase his lead in development. So it's a true gambit. He's playing here in true gambit fashion. Let's see what would happen, though, if he did grab the pawn. You have knight on B takes D5, castles, bishop E7, knight takes, bishop F3. Then you have the bishop to E6 to protect the knight that's attacked. The knight goes to C2 with the intention of going to D4, pressuring the bishop here on E6 and destroying black's pawn structure, giving him an isolated pawn. This would be better for white here. This is definitely one of the reasons why Kasparov didn't grab the pawn. This is what Karpov was hoping for. This is what he had been preparing for before the game. He was hoping that the line would go in this direction here. But instead of doing that, Kasparov played bishop C5 here, developing. And castles was played here. So Karpov was going for a nice, safe, balanced position. He didn't want to go for any fireworks. He could have challenged Kasparov right here. He could have played bishop E3 right here, and this would have been a better continuation. He actually had this in a previous game against another opponent, and he actually won that game. So he knew this line. He could have continued in this line, but he chose not to. This would go bishop takes e3, queen a4 check, knight blocks, queen grabs the knight on b4, bishop goes back and hits the queen. Now you have queen e4 check. Now the king moves to f8, castles, and at the end of this line here, you can see that white is clearly better. The black king has lost his castling privileges. Look at the light square bishop there on c8. It's blocked in. Black has no queen side expansion yet with the pawns on the queen side. The knight there in d7 is blocking the bishop. It's a very passive and awkward position to play here. So white would be much better here. So going back to the move where he made instead in the game, instead of playing that move there, bishop e3, he castled instead. And it's a lot tamer position here, but he doesn't have as active as position as he would have. It's much more calmer though for him, but probably not the best decision. So black castles. He plays bishop f3, bishop f5. Now this prevents the knight on a3 from going to the c2 square and getting back into the game, because now you have the black bishop and the black knight on b4 covering that c2 square. Bishop g5, development. Rook e8, development, getting his rook to an open file, because rooks belong with open files. Queen d2. So you just have some normal developing moves here. Now you have b5, strikes out on that queen side, gets expansion. And if you look at the position, black actually has more space than white, which is rare, considering white is given the first move of the game. So he should have more space here. Rook a d1. Karpov is insistent on keeping that pawn on d5. Now you have knight d3. And the knight here is a monster. It's actually been known now as the octopus knight because it covers so many squares in Karpov's territory. People call this the octopus knight just because it's a monster, it's a beast. And Kasparov is also threatening to play b4 here, which would fork the knights. Now you have knight a b1, trying to get out of that upcoming fork. h6 puts the question to the bishop. Bishop goes back to h4. b4, Kasparov is expanding more, gaining more territory. And look at white's pieces. They're just horrible. They're all on his knights are on the edge of the board. His bishops are on the side of the board. All of his pieces are on the side of the board. Now look at black's pieces. They're in the middle of the board. They're very active. So this is much, much better for black right here. Now you have bishop to d6. You have a trap here. If Karpov doesn't play very carefully, he can get his queen trapped here with the next move, rook c8, and then bishop to g4. That would actually trap Karpov's queen. So you have bishop g3, which stops that. Rook c8. And now you have b3. White is trying to make room so he can swap off that octopus knight on d3. And you have a very aggressive move here, g5. Kasparov is expanding on the king side, and more importantly, he's going after this f4 square here, to where he can make room for his knight to go to f4 there, in case Karpov does play knight b2. And then Kasparov can also just push to g4, attacking the light square bishop on f3. So you have a trade here. Bishops are taken off the board. And now G3, which covers that critical F4 square. So now Black's knight can't retreat to that crucial square there. Now you have knight D7. Yeah, knight D7. Now, Kasparov could have won the pawn back right here. But what he wants to do is he wants to reinforce that monster knight that's on D3. So he's going to reroute his other knight back to D7 and then maybe to E5 to reinforce that knight. Bishop G2 right here. White can't play knight B2 just yet. Let's see what happened if he did. If he played knight B2 right here, then you would have queen going to F6, eyeing that B2 square. The knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes. Now you would have the masterful knight E5, which hits the queen, yes, but it actually traps the queen because the queen doesn't have any squares to go to now. Like if it goes anywhere over here, it's taken. And then the thing is, with the knight being right here, forking the king, like if the queen went there to D2, then the knight just plays knight takes F3, check, and it would fork the queen as well. So that's why the queen is actually trapped. And that's hard to spot. That would be very, very hard to spot. But Karpov is a world champion. He's a class champion, one of the greatest players in the history of chess. So he definitely spotted that, and he realized that he could not play knight b2 at that moment. So he played bishop g2. Queen goes to f6. Now black is back on that b2 square with the knight and queen. And now that knight on a4 is pretty much out of the game completely. a3. Karpov is still trying to get his pieces into the game, trying to get rid of that b pawn there, so his knight on b1 can get into the game. Kasparov says, no, no, no. A takes B, A takes B. Now you have queen A2. Getting out of the way of that D2 square, so maybe his knight can on B1 can get into the game. Maybe now he can put his knight on D2. And now you have bishop G6, which is a great move because this clears the way for the rook to go to E2, and then it could beat up on the F2 square. You could have the knight, the rook, and the queen all beaten up on that F2 square. D6. And at this point here, Karpov finally says, okay, you can have your pawn back. Now he's trying to give the pawn back so he can use that time that it would take to recapture to get a little bit more active and to get his pieces in the game. So now he's like tapping out, trying to say, okay, here's your pawn back. Now let me develop. But it's too late for that because Kasparov was like, nope, I'm going to play G4 here, clamping down even more space. Now he's eyeing that F3 square, just taking more space. The queen goes back to D2. It's not that many moves that Karpov can play. He's been basically just completely dominated at this point. King moves up to G7, just placing his king in a more active, on a better square in case things start opening up on the H file. Black will be able to swing his rooks to along that back rank. F3. Now you have queen takes D6. Kasparov finally reclaims his pawn. F takes G. And now you have queen D4 check. And more importantly, it takes that B2 square away. Like Kasparov has owned that B2 square this whole game. making that knight on a3 just completely dominated and out of the game. White can't get his knight in the game. So then you have king h1. Now you have a very good move here, knight f6, which is eyeing the g4 square, but more importantly, it wants to go to that f2 square where it can harass the king and cause some tactical problems. Rook f4, which protects that pawn on g4 and also hits the black queen. Knight e4, eyeing that soft f2 square that we were just mentioning. Queen takes d3 here. Knight f2, check. That actually wins the queen. Now you have rook takes knight, but you have bishop takes queen. Rook f d2. Now this is actually like a sneaky move here, where Karpov was hoping that he could play the knight to b2 and then pick off that bishop there on d3 because the bishop is pinned to the queen. But Kasparov just sidesteps that with queen e3. Rook takes. Now you have rook c1, which is a brilliant move. Absolutely brilliant move. But if Queen e1 was played here, this looks like it's a good move, but it actually doesn't work because the bishop would just block and black would not have any follow-up here. So his attack would be stalled out. So rook c1 was played in the game. Double exclam. It's a brilliant move there. Knight b2 was played by Karpov, which is a blunder. The game is tactically lost at this point. Queen f2, that's making way for the rook to go to e1 and then deliver forced mate. Knight d2 was played in the game. If rook takes c1 had been played, then you would have rook e1 check, rook takes, queen takes, bishop blocks, and then queen checkmate. So that's why he could not take the rook there. It was a poisoned rook. So he played knight b2 instead. Queen f2 was played. Again, the rook is eyeing at that e1 square. Knight d2 here. You have rook takes d1, knight takes d1, rook e1 check. And Karpov resigned at this point. It's no way that he could stop the upcoming mate. If he would have continued, it would have been knight f1 to block the check, but then Kasparov would just eat it. Rook takes f1, bishop takes f1, and then queen takes bishop. And I have to note and say that Kasparov considered this game here his most brilliant game that he's ever played from a creative standpoint, just because he was able to work out the opening, middle game, and sort of the end game. He was able to work that all out strategically and creatively ahead of time, and everything just kind of worked out masterfully. So, okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this wonderful game. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Till next time.